What do you want to hear about this time? The rebellion of Sukar, where Clint turned pirate and raided several Empire ships? Oh, that's right. I promised you the story of when we flew a ship into a star. That was a nail-biter, let me tell you. Clint and I had only been free for about a month. We had been flying around the stolen Mentas ship from Nas, and it was not the greatest ship in the galaxy. Things were always falling off or breaking. One time Clint got so mad at it he pushed his foot through the wall in anger. So he landed on a junkyard planet and got to work on the ship. I was tasked with scavenging for stuff we could sell on the market for marks. Very boring work, let me tell you. But we got several hundred marks out of it, so I guess it was worth it. We were there for about a week until Clint finished the ship. I walked back from the valley of discarded gold, as I had taken to calling it, with a sack full of valuable odds and ends. Ahead, in between the towering pile of refuse that made up this planet's landscape, I could see the large clearing that Clint had made into his workshop, piled high with bits and pieces from the ship and others he had found in the trash piles. I walked back and I saw Clint tightening down the panel above the warp drive. "Is she done?" I asked. I had no idea how far along Clint was on the ship. I'm not mechanically inclined. But Clint was, and that was made plain by the piles of tools and parts laying here and there. "That should do it. Let's pack up and get off this rock. I want to take her for a test drive," Clint said enthusiastically. He gathered his tools and carefully repacked them into a kit he had fashioned out of discarded trash. Slipping those into the storage hatch, he went for the cabin. He practically shoved me into the hatch in his hurry to take off. I had never seen him so giddy, not even after we got away from the Noir slave market. He slipped into the pilot's seat and pushed the start button. The ship hummed to life. It sounded much better than when we had first taken it. Then it sounded like a rogmouth was trying to eat a bag of rocks and chains. It didn't shake either, which was a good thing. It used to rattle with the most awful frequency. Now it just vibrated a little, a rather pleasant feeling, very relaxing for the neck and head. Clint eased the throttle forward and the ship lifted off, smooth and steady, so much better than the rough and jerky movements it had had before. Higher and higher the ship went, gaining speed the whole time, until we were in the upper atmosphere. Here Clint really let her loose, pushing the throttle past 2/3. The ship flew off into space. I looked over at Clint and he had the widest grin I'd ever seen. He looked like a kid who had just got a pet. No. It was more like a groom when he sees his bride at the wedding. "So, what's her name?" I asked jokingly. Clint grew somber, the grin disappearing from his face. "Her name is Susan," he replied, face shadowed and eyes distant as he seemed to remember someone. "Who was Susan?" I asked, assuming he named the ship after someone he had known. "My wife," he said curtly in a tone that said there would be no more discussion. I changed the subject. "This ship's going awful fast. She's not even in warp, but we've got to be going nearly half light speed." 2/3 light speed, Clint said. I looked at him in shock. "No ship's ever gone that fast outside of warp," I exclaimed. "What did you do to the engines?" "Nothing. I just cleaned out the pipes, added a few quantum defoilers, built a new quark processor and Voltron binder, and streamlined the warp inhibitor. Nothing anyone else couldn't have done." My brain struggled to comprehend what he had just said. When I had made progress into the technobabble, I realized that Clint said he had built or reconstructed new machinery for the ship to run on, better than anyone had ever made before, in the middle of a junk heap. Just who was this human, and was there an end to the things he could do to surprise me? I noticed out the viewport that the star ahead of us was getting awful big, awful fast. I looked over at Clint, checking to make sure he knew what was going on. He did, his green eyes fixed intently on the star. I settled back, waiting for him to veer off. He didn't. Clint, there's a star in front of us. You're driving into it," I said, worried. "I know," came the response. Good, good. Are you going to change direction?" "No." "What? Was he crazy? We would be caught in the star's gravity and incinerated." I grabbed the edge of my seat. The star grew closer and closer. Clint reached over and pushed the throttle to 90%. We drove towards the star faster and faster. We were surely going to be burned into a crisp. I didn't know what had gotten into Clint. I may have upset him asking about Susan, but he was overreacting a little bit. What are you doing? I shouted. You're going to get us killed. What? He seemed genuinely puzzled, as if he didn't know we were diving towards the surface of a giant burning ball of gas exceeding 10,000 degrees. We would be vaporized. The shield should hold. I don't see what you're getting so worked up about. Shields? The ship doesn't have shields. Since when did it have shields? Since I built them. Trust me, we're fine. We could fly into the star and survive. Please don't, I asked in a soft voice. I don't think my sphincter could handle it. He laughed at that. He turned the ship around and flew off into the stars. And that's the story of how Clint Stone, that crazy, suicidal human, flew into a sun with a ship he had just made the fastest in the galaxy, all to test the shields that he had just built with scraps. And that wasn't the only time Clint had made something better. That man is a genius with technology. He could take a blender, for food, and turn it into a computer capable of predicting the future. And it was always right. You seem to be interested in Clint. Which story should I tell next?